This is Brother Teacher. I did a video once or twice before over the past couple years, and one several months ago about this particular subject. I'm going to touch on it again, and it's about people who pretend to be martial arts masters and or experts. And this is probably a different approach to it, but still it's the same subject. And to a great degree, it annoys me. On the other side of that, I have sort of a respect for some of these individuals as well. So I'm going to say this. First of all, is it possible to learn karate or martial arts from a book? That's sort of a loaded question. We in America and in the world have learned things from books for hundreds of years. Now, as it relates to the physical aspect of things in martial arts and learning that from a book, it is always best to have an accredited martial arts instructor as part of that learning process, and to not just simply be from a book if you have zero knowledge of martial arts. Now, what's accredited? Chances are that individual has some sort of books on their art as well from the founder, perhaps, of the arts that they study. So, my first answer is this as it relates to learning martial arts or karate from a book is it's possible to learn martial arts from a book, but you still need to have an instructor who has been there and done that. You need an instructor who has physically learned the techniques. If it's karate, for example, the blocks, the strikes, hand and foot, elbows, and so forth, and stances and movements, or kung fu similar. And if it's judo and aikido, which is based more on leverage and momentum and an opponent's movement and so forth as it relates to physics, you would most definitely have to have an instructor to learn that. Now, due to the advent of YouTube and various other video platforms, we can see instructors demonstrating physically how to do techniques, but nothing replaces actually having an instructor teach you martial arts. So, back in the day when I was coming up in the early 70s, during the Bruce Lee craze, everybody wanted to do martial arts. Everybody wanted to learn karate, kung fu, or whatever, when Bruce Lee made it popular. So, there were people who were springing up pretending to know karate and just going through the gyrations and movements and emulating anything that they saw as it related to martial arts. It didn't make them necessarily a martial artist. It just meant that they were enthralled, if you will, or enamored with the fact that you could kick and punch and so forth. And it was just the thing at the time. But fortunately, Bruce Lee caused something to happen. He caused people to become interested in what most people would have deemed at the time Asian fighting arts, even though we know it goes way back beyond and or before Asia, all the way back to African civilizations, if you will. And then it transferred across the world, and it ended up in Asia at some point in time, and then for thousands of years thereafter, all the way from China and India down to Japan and Okinawa even. So with that said, again, Bruce Lee made it popular the world over, martial arts. Everybody wanted to learn how to use the nunchakus, some called the nunchucks, and so forth. Bruce Lee made those popular. But after he passed away, then came ninjutsu, shokatsugi, and so forth during the 80s and that. And then you had Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bloodsport, and then you had Steven Seagal follow, and so forth. And then you started having the Gracies appear on the scene with the MMA and or the UFC and the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu thing. But Jiu-Jitsu existed way before the Gracies even. So, cutting to the chase again, you've always had people who copied. You always had people who never learned officially under an accredited instructor. And again, an accredited instructor oftentimes is labeled by the people, not self-acclaimed. So I've heard people, for example, over the years say, hey, who was your teacher? You never learned from a karate master and so forth. Well, who did the karate master learn from? I'm trying to get you to think right now. Who did the karate or the kung fu master learn from? Was this a person who created the system and or the style themselves? So how good were they at the time? So what made them worthy of the title of master? The people. It is how they perceived an individual based on their lack of knowledge on fighting. So through my experience in my over 50 years now in the martial arts, studying several disciplines, I have encountered, I've seen, I have even befriended some individuals over the years who have never had a real instructor up close and personal, and have never been certified or ranked by an instructor, but what they did because they had some passion of some sort for martial arts or some specific martial arts, and so they began to teach a couple people what they thought they knew, or maybe even learned a little bit from someone else they did. So those people start calling them teacher, or sensei, or shifu, or guru, or doctor, or whatever. At some point in time, those people's heads began to expand with ego, and they got beside themselves, and they just considered themselves a master. And once someone who's uneducated say, hey, Master so-and-so, Master Jones, Master Smith, they didn't know anything about their credentials. All they saw was a person who knew more, or seemingly knew more about fighting than they did. So they followed this individual, and once this person picked up some traction, and then people start to follow them and call them teachers, then they'd open up a little school somewhere in their basement or in their home or even a recreation center and say, I'm instructor so-and-so. And oftentimes no one ever checked their credentials. So do you have to have credentials to qualify you as an instructor? Something for you to think about. Okay, so what's the track record? How many individuals have you actually taught martial arts? How many people have actually benefited from what you taught them? So here's where the rubber meets the road. I have met individuals, I have come across individuals that had never officially studied under a martial arts master or instructor. And all they really did was watch movies and videos, thanks to YouTube for many. And once they've done that, once some people started to brag on them, family members oftentimes, they stuck their chest out. They said, oh, my cousin or my brother or my uncle studies karate. He's a karate teacher and so on and so forth. But because it's family, you never really want to berate them or put them down because it's family. And then you had friends, the next thing you know, you develop a following. And so now you are an instructor. According to who? The people that you're surrounded by that love and care about you. But are all martial arts instructors who have never had a martial arts instructor really martial arts instructors? You can think about that for a moment. So there are some people who are well-intentioned, who wanted to be martial arts instructors, but for some reason they just never actually got under the wings of someone who actually has done the thing. And over a period of time, they begin to pick up some of this and some of that from other people, and they begin to bump heads with other martial arts instructors who did go through the ranks. And they don't really question them because they try to befriend these martial arts instructors, and after a period of time, those other martial arts instructors look at them and say, well, this is teacher so-and-so, or this is master so-and-so, not knowing any different. But I know the difference. And many people like me who are from the old school know the difference. And I specifically and definitely know the difference with those individuals who have come up around me in my city. I know who's who. I do. This is not an indictment against anyone. I'm just trying to get you to think when it comes to martial arts instructors. And some of those people who fall under this label, if you will, of instructors or masters who have never actually been certified and who have never actually studied under an instructor, some of you should beware. because real teachers know you. Real martial arts instructors know you. And also, there are some of you who are really well intentioned. You have good hearts, great hearts, and you've fallen so far down this rabbit hole, you don't want to withdraw now because you've gotten some traction and people have followed you. And once you've been labeled as master and you've accepted it, so to speak, for this short period of time in your martial arts career or lack thereof, you won't let it go because it feels good to be looked up to. It feels good for somebody to say, well, that's Master so-and-so. And especially when you have students that follow you that you've signed up all of a sudden. And you're picking up the pieces as you go along and you're growing in this ignorance that you had in the beginning because you never really knew it in the first place. So I'm not beating up on you, you guys who have good intentions. I'm not beating up on you. As a matter of fact, my hat goes off to you because of your sincerity of heart wanting to help other people, especially as it relates to martial arts. But I will say this to you. Since you did approach it the way that you did, don't forget to be humble. Humility is key. It's number one. Don't fake the funk. Don't pretend to be something that you're not. Even though you came this way, be very, very careful. Get around instructors that have been around and who have had decades of training officially, and learn as much as you possibly can from them. And maybe sometimes you can steal away and have a conversation, a quiet moment with some of those instructors and tell them that you really don't know that much. Would you help me? You'd be surprised from those who will open their arms to you and say, well, here you go. May I be a student of yours or an associate student of yours and learn something? That's the honorable way to do it. Rather than be out here in this massive world of martial arts masters and practitioners under one roof, pretending that you're something that you're not. It doesn't mean that you won't earn that. You'll earn it, but it will be like, how should we say, reinventing the wheel. Had you gone the proper way with an instructor who was already solid in what they were doing, who had a foundation to give you, it would have been much better. But it's more difficult being an individual who has never truly studied under a master. There's a lot of things that you have to learn when it comes to being an instructor. And one of those things is you have to learn how to be humble if you're not already humble. You have to learn how to discipline yourself to train in a specific art that you're in and be diligent about it. You have to also learn, which is very, very key, how to deal with other individuals, other people, because dealing with people is an art in and of itself. Because you're dealing with someone's child, you're dealing with someone's wife, daughter, or an elderly person and so forth. You have to understand all of these different possibilities as it relates to the types of people that will come to you for tutelage. And they're looking for someone who knows what they're doing and who knows their art. And it's a disservice to that individual if you really cannot supply that. And don't be ashamed if you can't do certain things. Go and find somebody who does know what you need to know. Go and find someone who really does know their stuff and learn from them. And then you can kind of filter that into what you're doing, your own program. But on the flip side of that, now let me talk about real quick and then I'm gone. Those people who are faking the funk, who pretend to be instructors and want to call themselves a guru and a master and so forth. You guys, you rebel rousers, you chasing skirts in the street, you types of guys. And even women on some level. But you guys, you men are really, really bad about this. You're going around and see who you can sleep with. And you're going to try to put on these tight gis and uniforms and so forth, and for the black guys you got the dread thing going on and so forth, and you got the tattoos going on, and you're trying to impress women or your girlfriend or several girlfriends over a period of time. That's not martial arts. You don't know what you're doing. You won't last long, and especially if you're doing drugs. I have to throw that in there, because there are some guys who call themselves masters or grandmasters or whatever, You're doing a lot of things to tear down your body. You can't do them both. Either you're in this thing all the way or you're not. There's no such thing as half a martial arts master or practitioner. Martial arts is not a game. It is not a hobby. It is a lifestyle. It is a way of living. And it's something that can benefit you now and for the rest of your life. Think on these things. You know, I may add a part 2 to this video because I want to go a little bit deeper on some of these guys that are studying or training in the martial arts, supposedly being masters and so forth. And I speak to my shame because I am compassionate and empathetic to some people, as I pointed out with the one scenario with the guys who have the good heart and want to teach people martial arts and that. And I understand, you know, a lot of times we don't know what we don't know as human beings, as people. And even though you may have studied martial arts under another individual, but if you keep tracing it back and tracing it back, we all learn from somebody else that studied from a book. You know, virtually everything is in a book, and books date hundreds of years ago. You know, so I can't beat up on people who study martial arts on a video or a book and say that, you know, point blank, you don't know what you're doing. I can't say that because a lot of what we have studied and learned in many, many aspects of life have come from books. I mean, when you go to college professors are not standing there just talking to you without any literature. You're looking out of a book. Everything you learn in science and biology and physiology and physics and whatever, it's all in books. Math is in a book. Nobody's just standing there talking to you and say, well, just memorize this. No, you're learning it out of a book, and a man put it in a book. So you have to look at it from that standpoint too. So I can't really beat up on someone who hasn't had a physical instructor, but I will say that there are people who have studied under instructors who are credible, and there are people who have never had a physical instructor who learned from a video that are credible as well. Now, the same is true conversely on the flip side. There are people who study under instructors who are terrible instructors, and there are people who have not studied under instructors. Those are the ones you need to watch out for real, you know, because they really don't know what they're doing. That was all I had to say. This is Brother Teacher. I'll see you in the next video, and possibly a part 2 to this, possibly. And if there's any questions that you would like me to answer as it relates to this again, or if you have any subject matter that you would like me to address, maybe that I haven't talked about or talked about in a while, please let me know that in the comment section as well. Until then, Yahweh loves you and I love you, like I always say. So long.